The nightmare arrived without warning. The call came at 2:11 a.m., the very hour I had always dreaded. Late-night calls are never good news. They carry words too cruel to wait for dawn. My hand trembled as I reached for the receiver on the third ring. "Mrs. Carter, this is St. Mary's Hospital. Your son, Daniel, has been admitted with what appears to be a brain aneurysm. You need to come immediately." The world tilted beneath me. At 66, I had already endured the death of my husband years earlier, but nothing prepared me for this. Daniel, my brilliant, kind-hearted only child, couldn't be slipping away. That wasn't how life was supposed to work. I arrived at the hospital still in my nightclothes beneath a heavy coat, hair disheveled, hands shaking as I gave my name at the front desk. A grave-faced physician guided me into a quiet room, and the words that followed shattered me. Massive aneurysm. No warning signs. Nothing could have been done. Already gone. Daniel was gone. The hours blurred together, lost in paperwork and impossible decisions that no mother should ever face. Near midday, Elena, Daniel's wife of 11 years, finally appeared. Oversized sunglasses shielded her eyes, her manicured fingers tapping restlessly on her phone. "Traffic was awful," she said flatly, avoiding my gaze. "And I had to find someone to watch Ethan." I had already called Ethan's school, spoken to his teacher, and arranged for him to stay with a classmate's family. That Elena hadn't even thought of this, leaving her 8-year-old son uninformed about his father's condition, was painfully consistent with the woman my son had chosen to marry. "Daniel is gone," I whispered, watching her carefully. Elena's mouth formed a small circle of shock. Her hand drifted to her throat, a gesture that might have seemed natural if I hadn't spent years watching her staged reactions. "But he was fine yesterday," she murmured. "We had dinner, then he went to his study to work. I went to bed early. I didn't even say good night." For a fleeting moment, true regret flickered across her face, but just as quickly it was replaced by something else. Calculation. Relief even. She masked it with practiced sorrow, but I saw the crack in her performance. Throughout the day, Elena slipped away for hushed phone calls, always turning her back whenever staff approached about funeral matters. When decisions were required about Daniel's remains, she dismissed them with chilling indifference. "You'd know what he wanted better than I would," she said casually. By evening, as we waited for Daniel's body to be released to the funeral home, Matthew Lawson arrived. Daniel's closest friend since law school and his attorney. His grief was evident in his reddened eyes and the tight embrace he gave me. "I can't believe it," Matthew whispered. "I just spoke to him on Monday." I nodded, words lost in the storm of grief. Turning to Elena, Matthew offered condolences, which she received with a carefully practiced nod. "We'll need to meet soon," he said, his professional tone slipping in. "There are matters regarding Daniel's will that can't wait." "This," Elena straightened, dabbing at eyes that remained suspiciously dry behind her sunglasses. "Of course. Perhaps tomorrow. Best to settle things quickly for Ethan's sake." The mention of my grandson, pain and resolve stirred inside me. Ethan, sweet, sensitive Ethan, who had just lost his father while his mother already spoke of settling matters. "Ethan needs to be told face to face," I said firmly. "I'll go with you when you pick him up." "That's not necessary," Elena replied sharply. "I can handle my son." The emphasis on "my" was deliberate, her usual assertion of control when it suited her image of a devoted mother, though in reality Daniel had carried the bulk of parenting. And increasingly so had I. "He adores you," Elena added after a beat, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "He'll need his grandmother more than ever now." But I recognized the manipulation instantly. After decades as a psychology professor, I knew the tactics of control when I saw them. Elena was already staking her claim, ensuring I'd remain useful for childcare while she secured authority over decisions. As we left the hospital, I caught her reflection in a glass pane. She paused, adjusting her hair, smoothing her coat before pulling out her phone to make another call. For just that moment, unguarded, unaware of my watchful eye, Her face showed no grief, no shock. Only cold calculation. I turned away, my heart breaking anew. My son was gone, and my grandson was now in the care of a woman who viewed tragedy not as loss but as opportunity. What I couldn't know then was that Daniel had anticipated this very outcome. He had taken deliberate steps to protect Ethan and me from the woman he had come to recognize as a danger. In the days that followed, as I fought through grief to arrange my son's funeral, I began uncovering the foresight of Daniel's plans and the depth of Elena's deceptions. But that first night, as I returned home alone, clutching a photo of my son as a boy to my chest, I could only whisper one vow. For Ethan. I must be strong for Ethan. Something in Elena's behavior had awakened every protective instinct in me. My grandson had lost his father. I swore he would not lose his grandmother, too. A single midnight call had upended my life. But I sensed Elena's reaction to Daniel's death was not grief, it was strategy. What secrets had my son uncovered about his failing marriage? And what protections had he put in place before the end? The answers would come soon enough, and they would change everything. 17 missed calls, Elena muttered, exhaling in annoyance rather than despair. Her flawless face betrayed no trace of grief. No puffy eyes, no drained spirit, none of the raw devastation that had hollowed me out from the inside. What arrangements? I asked, careful to keep my tone inquisitive instead of accusatory. Life doesn't stop, Margaret, she replied coolly, not even glancing up from her phone. Bills, accounts, notifications. Daniel managed everything. Now it's all on me. Not us. Not we'll figure it out together for Ethan. Just me. Later, as I tucked Ethan into the back seat of my car, Elena had asked me to keep him overnight, so she could have space to process. But as my grandson drifted off against the seatbelt, I felt a deep unease, tinged with something else. It was as if Daniel's presence hovered near, urging me to stay alert, to protect what he could no longer defend. We'll be okay, Ethan, I whispered, brushing a hand over his hair. Somehow, we'll be okay. I didn't realize how prophetic those words would become, or how difficult keeping that promise would be. The funeral had already exposed the chasm between Elena's carefully staged sorrow and Ethan's raw heartbreak. And now, in Matthew Lawson's office the day after, the truth began to surface. Elena Lawson, Matthew read solemnly, Daniel Carter has left you the Lake House property, his investment portfolio with Brookfield Partners, and a life insurance policy totaling $500,000. For a moment, smug satisfaction flickered across her face. But as the list continued, her composure cracked. The family home on Linden Street, both vehicles, and Daniel's account at Grandview Bank are bequeathed to his mother, Margaret Carter. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, while Elena's manicured nails dug deep into the leather of her chair. That's impossible, she snapped. The house is ours, marital property. We bought it together. Matthew slid a folder across the polished desk. The deed was in Daniel's name alone, purchased before your marriage. Never converted to joint property. The paperwork confirms this. Shock rippled through me. Daniel had never mentioned these changes. The house, the cars, even an account I hadn't known existed, all placed in my care. And Ethan's college fund? Elena demanded, her voice edged with panic. A trust, Matthew explained calmly. But you are not its trustee. Then who is? Matthew's eyes flicked briefly to me. Mrs. Carter. The silence in the room was deafening. I could almost see the gears turning in Elena's mind, tallying assets, recalculating her next move. This isn't what Daniel and I planned, she said finally, her tone now carefully sculpted to sound more hurt than angry. He wanted his family safe in that home. Margaret, you have your own house. Surely you won't take Ethan's home away from him. It was a clever manipulation, framing my inheritance as an attack on my grandson rather than a safeguard from her. I'm as surprised as you are, I said evenly. I need time to take this in. Matthew finished the reading, outlining smaller bequests and charitable donations, but my eyes kept drifting to Elena. She texted furiously under the desk, her face blank except for those flashes of calculation that betrayed her. When the meeting ended, Matthew asked me to stay behind. Once Elena swept out, offering a tight smile and muttering, "We'll talk soon," he closed the office door. "There's more," he said quietly. "Daniel left this for you." He handed me a sealed envelope. My breath caught at the sight of Daniel's handwriting. "Should I open it now?" "Not here," Matthew said gently. "Take it home. Read it when you're ready. And Margaret, trust him. He knew exactly what he was doing." At home, after leaving Ethan at school, I finally broke the seal. Daniel's familiar script filled the page. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. I'm sorry. Please don't think of the house, cars, or money as yours. They're tools to protect Ethan. I fear Elena is not who she pretends to be. I've seen things that made me fear for both of you. She'll fight. She'll manipulate. Don't let her know what you know. Watch. Wait. Document everything. Matthew has the rest of the evidence. I love you, Mom. I'm counting on you to protect my son." Tears blurred the words. Even in death, Daniel had been shielding us. He had prepared me for a battle I never wanted to fight. And I understood my role now, not as grieving mother alone, but as guardian, strategist, and protector. 3 days later, over breakfast, Ethan asked softly, "Grandma, when is Dad coming back?" The innocent question pierced me. At 8 years old, he grasped death in theory but not yet in heart. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "Remember? Daddy's body stopped working. He can't come back. But the part that loved you, the part that made him your daddy, that's still here. Always." Then nodded, eyes glistening. "Sometimes I forget in the morning. I think he's still making pancakes." I swallowed hard. "Would you like me to make pancakes on Saturdays instead?" "They won't taste the same," he said sadly. Then, almost shyly, "But I'd like that." I stayed in Daniel's house, my house now, helping with Ethan while Elena claimed she was handling paperwork. In truth, I suspected she was already arming herself legally. One afternoon, I returned to find her waiting in the kitchen, sleek in a tailored black suit. She kissed my cheek mechanically. "Margaret," she said, settling at the counter. "We need to discuss what comes next." I set coffee before her, masking the storm inside me with a practiced calm. "This house," she began, her voice trembling just enough for effect, "holds too many memories. Every corner reminds Ethan of what he's lost. I think it would be healthier for him and for me if we started fresh somewhere else." Her words dripped with intention. And for the first time, I knew exactly what game she was playing. I placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of her, watching her carefully. "You're thinking of moving?" I asked softly. Elena nodded, stirring the cup with practiced ease. "I found a beautiful condo downtown, right near the cultural district. Excellent schools nearby, walking distance to the library and art museum." She paused, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "The thing is, Margaret, with the way Daniel arranged things, I'll need your cooperation." "Oh." I tilted my head slightly, feigning curiosity, though I'd already predicted this conversation. "The will is obviously some kind of mistake," she said smoothly. "Daniel would never have left me in such a difficult position. I've spoken with an attorney, and we could avoid lengthy legal battles if you'd simply transfer the house to me. It's what Daniel would have wanted." I widened my eyes, as though considering her point instead of bristling at the manipulation. "I see, and what does your attorney say about Daniel updating his will just 3 months ago, specifically to put these arrangements in place?" For the briefest moment, irritation flashed across her face before she recovered her mask of controlled grief. "Daniel wasn't himself then," she insisted. "He was overworked, stressed, not thinking clearly about our family's best interests." I nodded gently, as though her words carried weight. That must have been very hard on you both. Her sigh was perfectly timed, theatrical in its weight. It was, which is why I know he'd want us to correct this oversight. For Ethan's sake. There it was, her trump card deployed exactly when I expected it. I took a slow sip of coffee, deliberately buying myself time. I understand your concern, I said at last. But grief clouds judgment. It wouldn't be wise to make major decisions so quickly. Perhaps we should wait a while before rushing into anything. Her smile tightened just a fraction. Of course. But the condo won't stay on the market forever. Ethan deserves a fresh start as soon as possible. It would make healing easier if we settled quickly. I recognized the tactic instantly. Artificial urgency, a sales strategy I taught countless psychology students to guard against. Why don't we ask Ethan how he feels about moving? I suggested mildly. He may find comfort in staying surrounded by memories of his father. Elena's response was quick and calculated. Children don't know what's best for them, Margaret. That's why adults make the choices. Ethan's already dealing with so much. It was clever, subtly casting me as the one who might harm Ethan by involving him in decisions. You're probably right, I conceded softly, watching relief flicker in her expression. Let me think about it for a few days. This has all been a lot. Her lips curved into a satisfied smile. Take the weekend. But Margaret, she added, leaning in conspiratorially, I am worried about finances. Daniel left debts, credit card bills, the mortgage. The mortgage, which was now legally mine, though I held that detail close. I'd be happy to go through the household accounts with you, I offered gently, seizing the chance to see what she was hiding. That won't be necessary, she replied quickly. Resolving the house situation would give me access to the equity we built for Ethan's education. I kept my face neutral, though I noted the slip. The education fund was in a trust Daniel had deliberately placed under my control. Her motives were growing more transparent by the day. Let's talk next week, I suggested, rising with a tired smile. I need rest before picking up Ethan. She left convinced she'd made progress, while I sat alone in the quiet house reviewing every word. Elena thought I was a fragile, grieving woman easily maneuvered into surrender. For now, I needed her to keep believing that. But I picked up the phone and called Matthew Lawson. I need to know exactly what evidence Daniel gathered, I told him, and how we can collect more. This is going to be a longer fight than I imagined. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, his troubled face looked up at me. Grandma, the mom says I have to go to Miami with her next weekend, but I don't want to. My pulse quickened. Miami? I asked casually, though alarm rang in my chest. She said her friend Richard has a boat and will stay in a fancy hotel. But I have my science project due Monday. Dad always helped with my projects. Ethan's voice trembled as he clutched his stuffed dinosaur tighter. Have you told your mom about the project? I asked softly. She said I can skip it. That teachers will understand. But Dad wouldn't want me to. He always said keeping promises matters. I smoothed his hair, heart aching. Your father was right. Commitments are important. Let me talk to your mom tomorrow. We'll work something out. After Ethan fell asleep, I dialed Matthew Lawson on the private number he'd given me. She's taking him to Miami. With Richard Hale. Do you know him? A sharp silence followed. Then Matthew's voice measured. Yes. Richard Hale. The developer Daniel flagged in his notes. The man Daniel worried about. My breath caught. Margaret, Matthew continued firmly. Did you install the home monitoring system we discussed? Yes. Cameras in common areas. Alerts to my phone. It was finished today. Good. Keep everything running. That footage may prove invaluable. Tomorrow I'll send a package from Daniel's private file. Don't open it where she could see. Understand? The next morning, after dropping Ethan at school, I received a thick envelope delivered by courier. Inside were printouts of text messages, pulled from Daniel's private investigation into Elena's phone records. They were between her and RH, dated as far back as 8 months. The words on those pages left no doubt. An affair. Plans whispered, cancelled, renewed. Proof. And my son had seen it coming. Texts were worse than I imagined. Complaints about Daniel working late, bitter remarks about feeling trapped, even cruel references to Ethan as a complication in her future with Richard. The most damning exchanges were just 2 months old. Elena, how long are we going to keep living like this? You promised you were ready to leave. Richard, patience. Daniel's name is on everything that matters. I need to get the finances lined up first. I'm working on it. Elena, the Cayman property won't wait forever. It's the perfect chance for us to start fresh. Richard, trust me. Just a few more months, Elena. Everything will fall into place. I set the papers down, my hands trembling. This wasn't just proof of an affair. It was evidence she had been planning to abandon my son, only after securing the assets she wanted. Had Daniel uncovered this trail of deceit? Was that why he'd changed his will so suddenly? The package also contained a private investigator's report. Grainy photographs of Elena and Richard entering a hotel together. Receipts for extravagant gifts he'd purchased. Even a dossier on Richard's questionable business dealings. The last page was a handwritten note from Daniel to Matthew, dated 3 weeks before his death. Matthew, enclosed is everything I've gathered. I'm not sure what my next step should be. If I confront her, I risk losing access to Ethan. Protecting him comes first. Let's meet Thursday to discuss options. Daniel died on Tuesday. That meeting never happened. Armed with these truths, I approached Elena carefully about the Miami trip. I waited until she came to collect Ethan's overnight bag on Friday afternoon. Ethan mentioned you're taking a trip to Miami? I asked lightly, as though making small talk. Just a quick weekend, she said, glancing at her diamond-studded watch. He needs a distraction. He's worried about his science project deadline, I said gently. You know how Daniel always emphasized schoolwork. Her smile tightened. A couple of days off won't destroy his GPA. The school counselor actually said new experiences can help with grief. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. Though I wonder if a boat trip with Richard might be a bit overwhelming so soon after losing his father. Ethan seems anxious. At Richard's name, her eyes narrowed. Ethan will be fine. Children adapt. They do, I agreed smoothly. Though sometimes routines help them through trauma. If you'd like, he could stay with me to finish his project while you go. I could see her weighing it, her desire for freedom battling with the facade of devoted motherhood. That's thoughtful but unnecessary, she said at last. This trip is about bonding. Of course. I smiled, then added casually. By the way, do you know Daniel's computer password? Ethan wanted photos for a memory book. She didn't hesitate. I never knew his passwords. Ask Matthew. A lie. I'd already found Daniel's password notebook hidden in his desk drawer. Her denial told me everything I needed. One more thing, I added as she reached for her bag. Ethan's class needs volunteers for their museum trip next Wednesday. I thought you'd like to sign up. I can't. I have a full-day spa appointment, she said breezily. Then, with a sigh full of performance, self-care is part of grieving, Margaret. I'm sure you understand. Of course, I said softly. I'll explain to his teacher. When she left with promises to return Sunday, I immediately called Matthew. She's taking Ethan to Miami with Richard Hale. Good, he said grimly. We'll document it. I've already hired the same investigator Daniel used. Photos, timestamps, everything. This trip may work in our favor. But what about Ethan? My voice cracked. Record how he feels afterward. Have him talk to his counselor. Every detail builds the pattern. I hated reducing my grandson's pain to evidence. But I understood. This was the case Daniel had started, and now it was my responsibility to finish it. Sunday evening, hours later than promised, Ethan trudged into the house with slumped shoulders and a pale face. His skin was sunburned, his stomach upset, and his spirit drained. "How was the trip, sweetheart?" I asked, crouching to his level. He shrugged, eyes downcast. "The boat made me sick." "He's exaggerating," Elena interrupted, tapping furiously on her phone. "Just a little motion sickness." The resort was gorgeous. The weather was perfect. He had a wonderful time. But Ethan's expression told the real story. "Can I go to my room?" he whispered. "Of course," I said softly. "I'll bring tea for your stomach." As he trudged upstairs, I noticed something missing. "Where is his backpack?" Elena waved dismissively. "It got wet on the boat. Nothing important." My heart sank. His science project had been in that bag. "I'll write a note," she said, finally glancing at me with a challenging stare. "The teacher will understand. Richard sends his regards, by the way. He was disappointed you couldn't join us." Her brazenness turned my stomach, but I kept my face serene. "How kind of him. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself." "Very much," she said with a sly smile. "Richard has excellent connections in Miami. We may have opportunities there." "Wonderful," I murmured. But inside, I was cataloging every word. Upstairs, I found Ethan sitting on his bed, staring at a photo of Daniel. His homework lay untouched on the desk. "Want to tell me about the trip?" I asked gently. His lower lip trembled. "Mom was on her phone the whole time. She and Richard went out at night and left me with a babysitter. 2 nights. She even fell asleep, and I got scared when I woke up alone." My chest tightened. "That must have been frightening." He nodded. "Richard has a big boat, but he said kids mess things up." Mom laughed when he said it. "Dad always let me help with his boat." Each word was another wound, another piece of evidence. "Did you tell Mom how you felt?" I asked softly. "She told me not to complain. She said it's important for her to be happy again, that I shouldn't make things harder." The cruelty of it, placing the burden of her happiness on an 8-year-old grieving his father, ignited a storm of anger inside me. I pushed it down. "It's okay to have feelings, Ethan," I whispered, pulling him close. "Even when adults don't want to listen. Your feelings matter." He leaned into me, his small body relaxing slightly. "Dad always asked about my feelings." "I know, sweetheart. And I promise I'll always ask too." After settling him with tea and salvaging what remained of his schoolwork, I wrote everything in my journal, just as Matthew instructed. Patterns mattered. One incident could be dismissed. A chain of them could not. Elena was building her escape plan. But I was building my case. Over the next 2 weeks, the patterns became impossible to ignore. Elena stayed out late more often, leaving Ethan with me for entire evenings without explanation. She skipped his school conference, sending me in her place with the excuse of estate matters. She forgot to refill his asthma prescription, forcing me into a frantic late-night pharmacy run when he wheezed during soccer practice. Every slip went into my journal. Every instance was another piece of a mosaic painting a clear picture. Elena was drifting further from her responsibilities as a mother, while Ethan clung more tightly to the stability I provided. The security system Matthew had advised me to install proved invaluable. Footage showed Elena sneaking Richard into the house late one evening, both of them tipsy, oblivious that Ethan was awake and saw more than he should. Another clip captured her coaching Ethan. "Remember to tell Grandma you had a great time today," after a half-hearted outing where she'd spent most of the time glued to her phone. Multiple videos confirmed a pattern. She'd promise Ethan she'd attend his activities, then cancel without a second thought. Through it all, I played my part, the understanding mother-in-law, the helper, the ally. Grief brain was her favorite excuse, and I never contradicted her. I nodded, smiled, reassured her, while my journal filled with ammunition. "Margaret, we need to talk about the house," Elena announced one evening, 3 weeks after Daniel's death. She had arrived unannounced, dressed not for a mother-son night, but for a dinner date. "Of course," I said mildly, closing Ethan's math workbook. "I've been meaning to ask which items you'd like to keep when I move in permanently next month." Her brows shot up. "Move in? I thought we agreed the house should be sold." "Oh, I don't recall agreeing to that." My tone was soft, almost apologetic. "Actually, I've been thinking it's best for Ethan to have stability right now. His therapist says familiar environments matter during grief." Her expression hardened, then smoothed into a mask of concern. "I worry about you, Margaret. This house is far too big for you to manage alone. The mortgage, the upkeep, the strain." "Daniel left it free and clear," I said casually, watching the flicker of surprise on her face. "And I can manage more than you think. Decades of running a university department taught me a thing or two." Her smile faltered just for a moment. In that instant, I saw her recalculating, reassessing me. She had underestimated me, but I made sure to keep my voice calm, my demeanor gentle. "Well, we'll discuss it later," she said finally, glancing at the clock. "I need to run. Important dinner. Finn's already eaten. He should be in bed by 9. When she left, I sat with Ethan at the kitchen table as he pieced together his science project again, rebuilding what had been lost in Miami. As he carefully glued planets onto his styrofoam solar system, he looked up suddenly. "Grandma, are you going to live here now instead of Mom?" Question caught me. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" He focused on aligning Mars at just the right distance. "Mom told someone on the phone you're trying to take the house from her. She said you're selfish." I chose my words with care. "Your dad wanted to make sure we all had safe places to live. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about the details." "I want you to stay," Ethan said simply. "You help me with homework. You remember my medicine. You make real food instead of just ordering pizza." His words, so simple, so pure, struck deeper than any legal clause. Even at 8 years old, Ethan understood the difference between performance and real parenting. "I'll do everything I can to stay close, no matter what," I promised him, silently vowing that it would be more than a promise. It would be a battle plan. The following week, over coffee, Elena dropped her newest scheme with calculated nonchalance. "I'm thinking of taking Ethan to my parents in Arizona for a few weeks." I stirred my cup, keeping my voice light. "Arizona? That's quite a distance. What about school?" "He can miss a few weeks," she said dismissively. "Children are resilient." The phrase, one Daniel had always used thoughtfully, sounded hollow from her lips, twisted into an excuse. "When were you planning this?" I asked. "Next week." My parents have been begging to see him, and I could use the support. Being a single mother is overwhelming. I bit back the truth that she'd been a single mother by choice long before Daniel's death, leaving her husband and me to handle Ethan's real needs. Instead, I murmured, "Understandable. Though consistency matters, too." His counselor said routine is important. Her eyes sharpened. "Are you suggesting I don't know what's best for my son?" "Not at all," I backpedaled smoothly, keeping my mask of deference. "Just thinking aloud." She leaned closer, her tone softening, almost conspiratorial. "Actually, Margaret, I wanted to talk to you about something important. Just the two of us. Dinner tonight? I'll have Melissa watch Ethan." "Melissa?" I raised an eyebrow. "Richard's assistant," she clarified quickly. "She's wonderful with children. She's helped before." Another note for my journal. Elena was leaving Ethan with her lover's assistant rather than his grandmother. I'd be happy to watch him, I offered, but dinner sounds nice. What did you want to discuss? Everything, she said vaguely. The house. Ethan's future. How we move forward. I think I found a solution that works for everyone. The restaurant she chose was deliberately impressive. Minimalist decor, tiny portions, prices designed to intimidate. Elena sat waiting in a sleek black dress that managed to be fashionable and mournful at once. Margaret, thank you for coming, she said warmly, brushing my cheek with air kisses. I ordered Veuve Clicquot. Daniel always said it was your favorite. It wasn't. Daniel knew I preferred simple Chardonnay. The false intimacy was part of her performance. How thoughtful, I murmured, seating myself. She poured champagne, raising her glass. To new beginnings. I sipped politely, recognizing the technique. Create comfort, suggest kinship, soften resistance before making the pitch. Margaret, she began after the appetizers, her voice tinged with practiced sincerity. These weeks have been brutal. Losing Daniel, helping Ethan, juggling endless logistics. I nodded, allowing her to set the stage. I've been thinking about what really matters. Family. Security. Peace of mind. And I think I've found a way we can all have what we need. I cut into my overpriced scallop, waiting. You and I both know Daniels will create complications. The house, the cars, the accounts. It's awkward. Not at all what Daniel would have wanted if he'd been in his right mind. I stayed silent, letting her play the scene. I've consulted an excellent estate attorney. He believes we can contest the will, argue that Daniel wasn't thinking clearly. His stress, his health, his medications, all evidence of diminished capacity. She leaned back, eyes gleaming with satisfaction, as if unveiling the perfect solution. And I realized the performance was no longer hers alone. It was mine too. It wouldn't be hard to prove diminished capacity, Elena said smoothly, her voice casual, too casual, as if invalidating Daniel's final wishes were no more serious than returning the wrong item to a store. My chest tightened, but my face remained calm. I see, I murmured, though inside I was screaming. Litigation is so unpleasant, she continued. It drags on for months, sometimes years. Not what Ethan needs right now. Absolutely not, I agreed softly, waiting for the angle, the trap hidden in her honeyed words. She leaned forward, her tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. So I've devised a better solution. One that gives us both what we want without messy court battles. And what would that be? I asked, my voice even though my pulse raced. You transfer the house and vehicles back to me as Daniel's widow, she explained, as though bestowing a great favor. In return, I'll guarantee you can see Ethan regularly. Holidays, maybe every other weekend. I'll even put it in writing. The sheer audacity of it nearly broke my mask. She was offering me visitation with my own grandson, rights Daniel had already secured, if I surrendered everything he had entrusted to me. That's quite a proposition, I said, forcing myself to take another sip of champagne to steady my hand. I know, she said brightly, mistaking my hesitation for temptation. Most women in my position would fight for it all. But I value your bond with Ethan. And frankly, she gave a little sigh, I could use the help. Occasionally. Occasionally, I repeated softly, catching the slip. She nodded. Single motherhood is demanding. And I do have my career to consider. Plus, Richard and I, she stopped abruptly, recalibrating. Well, eventually I'll want to rebuild my personal life. Having guaranteed childcare in place would be tremendously helpful. There it was. Not Ethan's well-being, her freedom. And what about Ethan's trust fund? I asked innocently. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. That arrangement is unnecessarily complicated. As his mother, I should have control of his educational expenses. Children's needs change. Flexibility is important. They certainly do, I agreed quietly, thinking of every time she had ignored Ethan's needs these past weeks. With a triumphant smile, she pulled a folded document from her purse. My attorney prepared a simple agreement. You sign, the assets transfer back, and I guarantee your visitation rights. Clean. Simple. Everyone wins. She slid the papers across the table with the smug confidence of someone who thought she'd already won. I scanned the legal language, thorough, ironclad, and designed to strip me of everything Daniel had placed in my care. Quite comprehensive, I said, buying time. And Arizona? Would I still see Ethan if you moved there? Her expression softened into feigned regret. The Arizona trip may become permanent. Richard has development projects there, and the private schools are excellent. A new start would be best for everyone. A new start, conveniently far from me, from Matthew, from anyone who might question her. I'll need to think about it, I said, slipping the papers into my purse. And of course, I'll have Matthew review them. He knows Daniel's wishes best. Her smile tightened instantly. I wouldn't involve Matthew. He's old-fashioned. My attorney assures me this is standard. Even so, I replied evenly, Daniel always taught me never to sign anything without careful review. She couldn't object without revealing her contempt for Daniel's memory. So she simply raised her glass again. Of course. Take a few days. But Margaret, her voice sharpened, a subtle threat cloaked in politeness. This really is the best solution. Fighting me will only hurt Ethan in the long run. The warning lingered in the air as she paid for our extravagant meal with what I strongly suspected was still Daniel's credit card. I smiled politely, thanked her for dinner, and walked out into the night, my hands finally trembling against the steering wheel as I drove home. She had shown her hand, and she had written it down. The next morning, I sat in Matthew Lawson's office, the damning document between us. She actually put it in writing, Matthew said, shaking his head in disbelief as he highlighted passages with a yellow marker. This is practically a confession. She's offering you access to your grandson only if you surrender assets that are legally yours. That's coercion, plain and simple. And this clause here, I added, pointing to the section about visitation despite relocation. It shows she's already planning to take Ethan to Arizona. Matthew nodded grimly. Combined with everything we've documented, the neglect, the cancellations, the Miami photos, the missed medication refills, this forms a compelling narrative. I leaned back, the weight of it pressing on me. So what happens now? Matthew's expression turned grave as he opened his desk drawer. From within, he withdrew a sealed envelope. On the front, in Daniel's familiar handwriting, were the words, "Emergency Protocol." My breath caught. Daniel prepared for this, Matthew said gently. He hoped we'd never need it. But he left instructions for this exact scenario. Inside was a carefully drafted petition. A petition for emergency custody modification, Matthew explained. Temporary custody for you, based on evidence of neglect and Ethan's best interests during grief. The words stunned me. Custody? You think the court would actually choose me? Age is not disqualifying, Matthew said firmly. You've been Ethan's consistent caregiver. The law considers stability, emotional security, and the child's welfare above all else. And right now you provide those things. Elena does not. He laid out the evidence methodically. My journal entries, the security footage, statements from Ethan's teachers, notes from his counselor, photographs from Miami, and now, the document Elena had drafted herself, treating Ethan as a bargaining chip. We'll need one more piece, Matthew continued. A neutral, court-approved child psychologist will interview Ethan tomorrow at school. Standard procedure. Nothing that will alarm Elena. My eyes blurred with tears as I stared at Daniel's handwriting, imagining the weight he carried in those last months. How long had he worried about her? How much had he seen before he realized drastic measures might be necessary? When do we file? I asked, my voice steadying into resolve. Within 48 hours of receiving the psychologist's report, Matthew said. He studied me carefully. Margaret, are you ready for this? Elena won't take it quietly. She'll fight. She'll be vindictive. I thought of Ethan's small, tired face after Miami. The way he had whispered that his mother told him not to complain because it made her unhappy. The way he had clutched his father's photograph, desperate for comfort. Yes, I said firmly, gripping Daniel's letter like a shield. I'm ready. What's our next move? Maintain the act, Matthew advised. Don't let her suspect anything has changed. I nodded. The game had shifted. The mask would stay on. But for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to Elena's performance. I was preparing for my own. If Elena presses for an answer, simply tell her you're still reviewing the proposal and have questions about visitation details, Matthew advised, sliding papers into a leather folder. Meanwhile, I'll finalize the emergency petition and coordinate with the psychologist. As I left his office, my phone buzzed. A new message from Elena lit the screen. Need your answer by tomorrow. Arizona arrangements pending. Important for Ethan's future. Her artificial urgency only steeled my resolve. Till reviewing, I typed carefully. Have questions about the visitation schedule. Can we discuss tomorrow evening? Her response came instantly, fine. 7 p.m. at the house. Richard's attorney will be present. Richard's attorney. Not Daniel's. Not a neutral mediator. Another detail for the growing file. That afternoon, I helped Ethan with his math homework. Between problems, he confessed that his mother had forgotten to pack his lunch again and scolded him for calling to remind her. I recorded every detail in my journal afterward. His slouched posture, his downcast voice, his instinct to minimize her anger. My grandson was learning to manage his mother's emotions instead of his own. That evening, Matthew called unexpectedly. The school psychologist met with Ethan during lunch, he told me. Her preliminary findings are strong. Ethan displayed heightened anxiety about his home environment, particularly about being sent away to Arizona. He also expressed clear attachment to you as his primary emotional support. My heart leapt. Is that enough? Combined with the rest of our evidence? Yes. I'm filing the emergency petition tomorrow morning. Judge Carlson typically rules within 24 hours. Should I prepare Ethan? I asked, worried about the upheaval. Not yet, Matthew cautioned. Children his age can't keep secrets of this magnitude. Maintain routines. If the ruling favors us, a child specialist will explain it appropriately. That night I slept little, caught between hope and dread. By morning, my resolve had crystallized. This wasn't about honoring Daniel anymore. This was about protecting Ethan from a parent whose choices deepened his grief. 10:17 a.m. Matthew called again. The petition has been filed. Emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. Elena will be served today. So soon. Judge Carlson takes potential flight risks seriously. Arizona raised alarms. What about tonight's meeting with Elena? I asked. Cancel it. Once she's served, you're to have no direct contact. She'll be volatile. Stay at a hotel if you must. And Ethan? My voice wavered. The order specifies Ethan remains with you until the hearing. The server will explain that to Elena. There was a pause. Margaret, are you absolutely ready? This will get ugly. I thought of Daniel's letter, of Ethan's quiet confession that his mother told him not to complain because it made her unhappy. I'm ready, I said firmly. The explosion came sooner than I expected. You scheming, manipulative witch. Elena's voice shrieked through my phone just hours after being served. Her fury crackled so violently through the speaker I held the phone away from my ear. How dare you try to steal my son? After everything I've done for you? My attorneys will bury you. When this is over, you'll never see Ethan again. I stayed silent, following Matthew's advice. Let her rage burn itself out. Are you even listening? Say something, she demanded. On counsel's advice, I can't discuss this with you directly, I replied evenly. I'll see you at the hearing tomorrow. You'll regret this, she hissed before the line went dead. Leaning against the counter, I finally let myself exhale. The petition had been served at her office precisely at 2 p.m., as planned. Ethan was already safe at home with me, spared from his mother's explosion. Now, as the sun dipped low, I forced myself to maintain normalcy. Ethan sat at the dining table, pencil scratching across his math worksheet. Grandma, can we have spaghetti? The kind with your special sauce. Of course, I said softly, grateful for the simplicity of the request. Want to help me make it? Together we chopped onions, stirred sauce, sprinkled cheese. For a little while we were just grandmother and grandson. But over dinner, his perceptiveness surfaced again. Mom sounded mad on the phone. Is she mad at me? No, sweetheart. Absolutely not, I assured him quickly. Adults get frustrated sometimes. It's never your fault. He nodded but frowned. She said she'll take me for ice cream tomorrow to make up for missing dinner. But she forgot last time, too. Another broken promise. Another note for my journal. After I tucked him in with extra stories and a kiss, I called Matthew for final instructions. The psychologist's report strongly supports us, he said. Tomorrow's hearing will be preliminary. You'll likely testify about Ethan's well-being and your ability to care for him. Elena will have her say too. Will Ethan be dragged into court? I asked, dread twisting my stomach. No. Judge Carlson reviewed the report and excluded him. This goes to full custody proceedings, maybe weeks from now. But not tomorrow. Relief flooded me. And Richard Hale? No legal standing, Matthew said grimly. But he's bankrolling her attorney. His shadow will be in that room. I swallowed hard. What should I expect? Prepare for her strategy. She'll paint you as an unstable, grief-blinded mother-in-law trying to take her child. Focus on Ethan. Keep calm. Remember why we're doing this. That night, I barely slept. I checked on Ethan repeatedly, watching his peaceful breathing, praying tomorrow would not shatter his fragile world further. By morning, dressed in a conservative navy suit Matthew insisted would signal steadiness and reliability, I brewed coffee with trembling hands. Why are you dressed up, Grandma? Ethan asked curiously as he buttered toast. I have an important meeting, I explained, helping him pack his school bag. Mrs. Wilson will take you today. Either your mom or I will pick you up this afternoon. He nodded, unfazed, more concerned about whether his favorite t-shirt was clean than the storm about to break over our lives. I hugged Ethan a little tighter at Ms. Wilson's door, wishing I could shield him from the storm about to break. Courthouse loomed ahead, its marble pillars and echoing corridors a monument to formality. Matthew was waiting at the entrance, his briefcase in hand, his face calm but lined with concern. Elena's already inside, he said quietly. Her attorney is Gerald Winters, Mitchell and Blackwell, one of the most aggressive family lawyers in the city. Richard's choice, I muttered. It didn't surprise me. And our chances? Matthew's grip tightened reassuringly on my arm. Judge Carlson is fair but cautious. We've built a strong case, but temporary custody is an extraordinary measure. Remember, this isn't about defeating Elena. It's about Ethan's well-being. Inside, Elena sat beside a sharp-featured man in a $1,000 suit. She was transformed, a conservative black dress, hair in a modest bun, her makeup subdued. On the table before her sat a framed photo of Daniel and Ethan, a prop in her carefully staged performance. Her eyes locked onto mine, cold with hatred, before she quickly softened her expression into one of wounded innocence, leaning close to whisper theatrically to her attorney. The act had begun. Precisely 9 a.m., Judge Helen Carlson entered, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. She scanned the file before her and spoke crisply. "This is an emergency hearing regarding temporary custody modification for minor child Ethan Carter. I have reviewed the petition and supporting documentation. We will proceed efficiently." For the next hour, Matthew presented our case with deliberate precision. My journals documenting Elena's repeated neglect, the late nights out, the missed school events, the medication oversight. He showed the security footage. He described Ethan's anxiety over Miami. He read excerpts from the psychologist's report. And finally, he laid down the document Elena herself had drafted, proposing to exchange my grandson for assets. It was a devastating sequence, calm and factual, every point backed with evidence. Then Winters rose. His voice was smooth, confident, rehearsed. He painted me as an interfering old woman unable to let go of control, exploiting Elena's grief to wedge myself between mother and son. He called my documentation obsessive, a fixation born of widowhood and loneliness. "Your Honor," Winters concluded, gesturing grandly toward Elena, "what we have here is not neglect, but a grieving mother wisely leaning on her family during an unimaginable loss. Mrs. Carter has kept Ethan overnight precisely 17 times since Daniel's death, by Elena's request. That is support, not evidence of incapacity. And the Arizona opportunity represents healing, a fresh start, not abandonment." When Judge Carlson called on me, I rose with trembling hands, but my voice steadied as I spoke. "Your Honor, I am not here to replace Elena as Ethan's mother. I am here because my grandson is 8 years old, grieving and frightened. Since Daniel's death, I've watched his anxiety grow while his needs are set aside. I've tried to provide stability, routine, meals, medicine, homework help, while his world collapses. All I ask is that, during this fragile time, his needs come first. The evidence shows other priorities are interfering with that." I held the judge's gaze, letting her see my sincerity. Judge Carlson questioned both sides, sharp, pointed queries. Her expression betrayed nothing. When she finally excused us so she could deliberate in chambers, my knees nearly buckled. The 60-minute wait in the hallway felt endless. Elena and Winters whispered furiously at one end, while Matthew and I sat silently at the other. When the bailiff called us back, my pulse thundered in my ears. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony," Judge Carlson announced firmly, "I find sufficient cause for emergency intervention in this custody arrangement." The air seemed to freeze around me. "Temporary guardianship of minor child Ethan Carter is hereby granted to Margaret Carter for a period of 60 days, during which a full family evaluation will be conducted. Elena Carter will have supervised visitation 3 times per week. Neither party is permitted to remove Ethan from this jurisdiction." I exhaled shakily, the words barely sinking in. Across the courtroom, Elena's mask shattered. Her face twisted in fury as she leaned toward Winters, hissing accusations and demands for appeal. Judge Carlson raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Carter, your reaction to this ruling concerns me. I strongly advise you to focus on demonstrating consistent parenting capacity during the evaluation period, rather than venting personal grievances." With a sharp rap of her gavel, she declared, "Court adjourned." As we left the courtroom, Elena stormed across the aisle, her carefully applied makeup streaked with tears. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice venomous. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming." Matthew stepped between us, his voice like steel. "All communication goes through counsel from this point forward. We'll arrange visitation according to the order." Elena's attorney tugged at her arm, pulling her back as she continued to glare at me, trembling with rage. I leaned against the hallway wall, overwhelmed by the enormity of it. Temporary custody. My son's warnings vindicated. Ethan's safe, at least for now. What happens next? I whispered. "We pick Ethan up from school," Matthew said gently. "Explain things with the counselor's help. Build stability. The hard part is still ahead. But for today, Margaret, he's safe." 6 weeks later, Ethan and I sat on the porch swing as the sun dipped low. His legs dangled, not quite reaching the ground. "Grandma, is Mom ever coming back?" His voice was small but steady. "She's going through a hard time, sweetheart," I said carefully, echoing the therapist's guidance. "She loves you, but sometimes adults struggle with big changes." He nodded thoughtfully. "Like when Dad died and she started staying out late." I kissed the top of his head, struck again by how much children notice. "Something like that. Are you sad?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But I'm not scared anymore." "Scared?" I prompted gently. "When Mom talked about Arizona, I was scared all the time. I didn't want to leave my school. Or you. And I don't like Richard. He talks to me like I'm a baby. Or like I'm not even there." I held him close, my heart breaking and hardening at once. The court evaluator had been meeting with Ethan each week. The final custody hearing was now only days away. "Do you think you're ready to talk to the judge?" I asked. He swung his legs, considering. "Miss Abernathy said I just have to tell the truth about what makes me feel safe and happy." "That's exactly right," I told him, even as a knot of dread coiled in my stomach. Because I knew when my grandson told the truth, it would either save him or unleash Elena's final, most desperate counterattack. The next morning, Matthew called earlier than usual, his normally steady voice edged with urgency. "Margaret, Elena's attorney just filed a motion to dismiss the custody case. They're demanding an immediate return to the original arrangement, with no restrictions." My grip tightened on the phone. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming our evidence was fabricated," he explained grimly. "That you manipulated Ethan into making statements against his mother, and that Elena's parenting decisions were simply normal struggles with grief." My stomach dropped. Could that actually succeed? Ordinarily, no. Our documentation is airtight. The psychologist's evaluation is strong. But, he paused, there's a complication. Richard Hale has ties with Judge Blackwell, who's been assigned to hear this motion while Judge Carlson is on medical leave. The implication hit hard. Influence and money could potentially undo everything. "What can we do?" I whispered. "I'm filing immediate countermotions. But Margaret, you should also know, our investigator confirmed Elena and Richard have placed deposits on property in the Cayman Islands. If she regains custody, even briefly, she could take Ethan out of the country. The enforcement there is difficult." A chill ran through me. She would. Course she would. Everything I'd observed these last weeks confirmed it. Ethan was little more than baggage to her. "I'll put safeguards in place," Matthew assured me. "I've already requested an emergency hearing with Judge Carlson when she returns next week. In the meantime, document everything. Any messages, any reactions from Ethan. Don't miss a single detail." That evening, as Ethan worked on a school project about family traditions, my phone buzzed. "We need to talk. No lawyers. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m. Riverside Park. Come alone or no deal." I forwarded the message to Matthew immediately. His response was blunt. "Do not meet her. This is a trap." But I knew this was the kind of maneuver Elena thrived on. Backroom deals, emotional leverage. Against his advice, I agreed to meet, but not alone. Matthew would be nearby, out of sight, and I would record everything. The next day, the park was nearly empty. Elena sat on a bench overlooking the river, sunglasses hiding her eyes, posture perfectly composed. "Thank you for coming," she said coolly. "I'm sure your attack dog lawyer warned you against it." "I'm here because any resolution that helps Ethan is worth hearing," I replied evenly, sitting a careful distance away. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of water lapping against the shore. When she finally spoke, her voice lacked its usual sharpness. "I'm dropping the custody case." The words stunned me. "What?" "You heard me." She slid off her sunglasses, revealing eyes rimmed with fatigue. I'm signing over full custody to you. No more hearings. No more evaluations. It's finished. I studied her, waiting for the angle. Why? Richard and I are moving to Grand Cayman next month, she said matter-of-factly. He secured rights to a resort project. We'll be there at least 3 years. Ethan needs stability. I can't give him that right now. Her tone was clinical, detached, as if discussing logistics, not abandoning her only child. So you're just walking away? I managed. I prefer to think of it as a responsible choice. She lifted her chin, almost proud. I'm recognizing you can give him what the court insists on, routine, structure. I'll send money, call when I can. Maybe he can visit during school breaks. Her casual detachment made my heart ache for Ethan. But beneath that sorrow, I felt profound relief. He would be spared the endless battles, the broken promises, the constant fear. What do you want from me? I asked quietly. A clean break, she said instantly. No contested hearings. No digging through my finances. Sign the agreement my attorney drafts and Ethan stays with you. I move on. And the house? Daniel's accounts? She waved dismissively. Keep them. Richard's new development will dwarf all that. I just want this closed. I kept my expression neutral while inwardly marveling. Daniel had predicted this, her self-interest, her abandonment. His careful planning had led to this very outcome. A week later, I sat in Judge Carlson's chambers as she reviewed the signed agreement. This is unusual, the judge remarked, eyes narrowing. Mrs. Carter is voluntarily surrendering her parental rights, leaving visitation to your discretion? She believes it's in Ethan's best interest while she relocates internationally, I replied, repeating the careful phrasing Matthew had prepared. The judge studied me. And you, at your age, are prepared to assume full guardianship? Without hesitation, I said firmly. Ethan needs love, stability, and connection to his father's memory. I can give him all 3. After a long pause, Judge Carlson signed the order. Custody of Ethan Carter is hereby granted to Margaret Carter, with financial support and limited visitation as outlined. Court adjourned. Sighed, Matthew touched my shoulder. Daniel would be proud. He protected Ethan the only way he could by entrusting him to you. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan and I planted a memorial garden in the backyard. Roses, lilies, and lavender, Daniel's favorites, surrounded a small stone bench where Ethan and I could sit and talk to Dad. Grandma, Ethan asked suddenly as we pressed soil around a rose bush, do you think Dad knew Mom would leave? His question pierced me. I think your father understood that sometimes adults make choices for themselves, not for their children. And he wanted to make sure you'd always have someone who put you first. Ethan nodded, satisfied. I miss Dad every day. But I don't miss how things were after he died when Mom was always mad or gone. I hugged him close. Your dad made sure you'd be taken care of. And that's what I'll do for as long as you need me. That evening, as Ethan slept peacefully upstairs, I sat alone in Daniel's study, now a shared space for homework and bills. On the desk was a small box Matthew had delivered after the custody order was finalized. Inside lay one last letter, written in my son's familiar hand, marked open when it's resolved. Mom, if you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't, protected Ethan. I watched Elena drift further from family life, her resentment of responsibility, her affair with Richard. I knew Ethan would one day become collateral damage in her pursuit of the life she really wanted. I'm sorry for the burden I left you. Asking a mother to step in as parent again wasn't fair. But I knew you would. 'Cause you always have. 'Cause Ethan deserves someone who sees him and puts him first. Tears blurred the words. Daniel had trusted me with his most precious gift. And I had kept my promise. Just as you've always put family first, Ethan couldn't ask for a more loving guardian, a stronger advocate, or a truer protector. Tell him stories about me, not just the shining moments but the flaws too. Tell him how I failed, how I tried to repair my mistakes, how I learned too late sometimes. Remind him that we are human, but love makes the struggle worthwhile. I love you both more than words can hold. Daniel. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming freely in the safety of solitude. Ethan couldn't see me cry, not now, not after all the tears he had already witnessed. The path behind us had been harder than I could have ever imagined. The grief of losing my son, the relentless battles with Elena, the ache of watching my grandson navigate trauma after trauma. And yet, as I looked around the house we now shared, I knew Daniel had trusted me with his greatest legacy for a reason. Soccer cleats abandoned by the door. Homework sprawled across the dining table. Ethan's colorful drawings taped proudly to the refrigerator. This house bore the marks of a child growing safe, secure, and loved. Some would call it justice, that Elena had chosen her own freedom over motherhood, revealing precisely the selfishness Daniel had foreseen. But I preferred to call it redemption, the chance to honor my son by raising his boy in a home filled with the values Daniel cherished. Through Daniel's foresight, my careful watchfulness, and Ethan's remarkable resilience, we had built something new out of tragedy, not the family any of us expected, but a family nonetheless. One rooted in loyalty, patience, and love. 3 years later. Grandma! I got the lead in the school play. Ethan burst through the door, now 11 years old, brimming with confidence that once seemed impossible. His backpack hit the floor as he shoved a script into my hands, his grin wide and unguarded. Our town. I'm playing George Gibbs, he announced proudly. I beamed, flipping through the worn pages. That's a big role. Did you know your father played the same part when he was in 8th grade? His eyes widened. Really? Really? I still have the old programs somewhere in the attic. He would be so proud to see you following in his footsteps. Ethan's grin softened into something more thoughtful. Should we tell Mom about the play? The question didn't surprise me. Though Elena had long since vanished into her life abroad, Ethan sometimes reached for her shadow, hoping for a connection that never came. We can send her an email if you'd like, I offered gently. It's your decision. He hesitated, then shook his head. No. She didn't reply when I told her about the science fair. She's probably still in Asia with Richard anyway. Through occasional updates from Matthew, I knew Elena had remarried and was helping Richard develop resorts in Thailand. Support payments came like clockwork, the only thread she still maintained, but without a single personal note or question about Ethan. That's fine, sweetheart, I said softly. Whatever makes you comfortable. He nodded firmly. I think just you, the Wilsons, and Uncle Matthew in the audience is enough. And with that, he bounded upstairs, humming lines from his script, the sound of a boy who had finally found his voice. That evening, after dinner and laughter with the Wilsons, neighbors who had become family, I found myself tidying the kitchen and pausing at the refrigerator. Photos covered its surface. Ethan's karate win, a science project ribbon, birthday candles extinguished with friends cheering beside him. It hadn't been easy. The first year after Elena left had been stormy. Nightmares, angry outbursts, painful questions Ethan struggled to understand. Why doesn't Mom call? Did I do something wrong? Would she have stayed if Dad hadn't died? With the help of a patient child psychologist, we navigated those stormy waters together. I learned to validate his pain without condemning his mother, to show him that her choices reflected her limitations, not his worth. Now 3 years on, Ethan was thriving. Strong grades, loyal friends, a resilience beyond his years. Our home had become ours in every sense. His sketches alongside my watercolor attempts, his baseball glove toss next to my gardening gloves, albums of trips and holidays lining the shelves. 68, I had found new purpose. Parenting again had given me vitality, grounding me in Ethan's joy and struggles alike. Even my own life had begun to expand. I'd started seeing a kind widower from the community theater where Ethan took classes. Life, it seemed, was not finished offering me surprises. Later that night, with Ethan asleep, I sat with our memory book. On its last page was Daniel's request: tell him stories about me, not just the good ones but the real ones. I had done that. I told Ethan of his father's warmth, his humor, his occasional stubbornness. I told him about the mistakes Daniel owned, the values he held tight, the way he had loved his son enough to prepare for the unimaginable. Outside, the garden bloomed in late summer light, roses and lilies surrounding the memorial bench Ethan and I had planted together. Inside, my grandson slept peacefully in the room that had once been his father's. Daniel could never have predicted every twist of fate. But he had understood Elena. He had seen her growing detachment, her resentment, her hunger for escape. And in his final act of love, he ensured Ethan would never face abandonment unprotected. That gift, his foresight, had given us both something unexpected: a second chance at family. Not the family we would have chosen, perhaps, but one built on trust, resilience, and love so strong it remade the broken pieces into something beautiful. Tomorrow, life would continue, memorizing lines for Ethan's play, balancing my checkbook, tending our garden. Ordinary days, extraordinary in their own way. But tonight, as I closed Daniel's final letter and whispered a thank you into the quiet house, I knew that despite grief, betrayal, and loss, love had indeed been Ethan's true inheritance. And in that, Daniel's story and mine had found its redemption.